In this video, Jordan Peterson explains the consequences of having an objective view of the world.
This is an existentialist claim, one of the consequences of developing the objective theory of existence was obviously all the amazing technology we have around us, and great, thank God for that, otherwise we'd be sitting outside freezing. But one of the consequences of that is once people established objective reality and then defined it as ultimately real, terrible questions of the meaning of life arose, like if the world, the universe is made out of nothing but dead matter, it's eternally existing, we're nothing but a candle flash in the wind, the idea creeps into your mind that perhaps all the damn suffering isn't worth it, or to put it another way, does your life really have any real meaning, or is that just an illusion? Well, Heidegger would say the reason that you have that problem is because you're approaching the entire problem wrong. Clearly things have meaning, they just don't if you make the hypothesis that what's objective is ultimately real and everything else is merely a secondary consequence of that. So, anyways, it's complicated. It takes a while to get your head around it. The humanists and the existentialists and to some degree the phenomenologists, they all came out of... There was a variety of sources for their thought, and I would say one of them is the clash between religion and science, or between value and objective truth. They're trying to rectify the division, and Piaget himself was trying to do some of that as well, so was Jung, I guess. And the other thing is a lot of the existentialist and humanist work was post-World War II. And so, after World War II happened with its immense catastrophes, of course, people who were thinking about human nature were very interested in why such a thing could happen. And existentialism, at least as a psychological school, arose in part as a reaction to the horrors of World War II. It's a very serious branch of psychology, and it mostly characterized thinking in the 1950s before the hippies came along and made everything sweetness and light. So, which is more where Rogers and Maslow fit. So we're going to talk about them a fair bit, the three different categories. And it's a kind of a strange approach in some sense that this class takes, because I talked to you about some psychologists in that period, but the people I talk to you mostly about they're not technically psychologists. Depends on what you mean by psychologist, after all. I talk a lot about Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, and also a lot about a Russian literary figure, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago, which was one of the... There was a few cataclysmic events that brought the totalitarian system of the Soviet Union to a halt. And you can argue about what they were, but one of them for sure was Solzhenitsyn's publication of The Gulag Archipelago, which is a 2,700-word book, 2,700-page book, gotta get that right, that describes what it was like to be there and how many people died. And it's a searing book. He won a Nobel Prize, and he deserved it. I mean, Solzhenitsyn, a remarkable person. He's like the Dostoevsky of the 20th century, and that's really saying something. And Dostoevsky is another person I use a lot in that section. And both Dostoevsky and Nietzsche regarded themselves as psychologists, fundamentally. And, it's funny because when you think about scientists, you usually think about people who are conducting experiments, right? But then one of the things, and you'll notice this if you think about it, a lot of you have taken a fair number of science courses of one form or another. And a lot of what you're taught when you're taught how to do science is how to generate, how to lay out an experiment properly, how to get the methodology right, how to do the analysis properly, maybe how to structure the revealing of your findings in proper scientific format, and how to test a hypothesis. But one of the things that you're never really told about is, well, how the hell do you generate the hypotheses to begin with? Because, really, that's at least half the problem, and it's probably a lot more than half the problem. And so, part of being a scientist is the ability to be a hypothesis generator, not just a hypothesis tester. Maybe you need to be both to be a true scientist. But maybe not. Maybe you can just generate extraordinary hypotheses, and it's certainly the case that people like Dostoevsky and Nietzsche were unbelievably good hypothesis generators. And so, their thinking in many ways underlies the entire development of thought, the sort of thought that you guys are going to encounter in university. Anyways, their thinking underlies the entire development of the edifice of I would say, both scientific and non-scientific thought across the entire 20th century. And so it's quite entertaining to go down there and, wander around the roots of these sorts of things, because you find out how things are linked together and why they're linked together and how they developed and what that means, and also what it means for you to have those ideas and why you have them and what role they play in your life. So